This video is a walkthrough of task 1 of the second AAT sample assessment for FAPS, level 3, the financial accounting unit. So we begin. So 6 tasks altogether, 2.5 hours. Marked out of 120. So task 1, first of all, 28 marks. This task is about using day books and accounting for and monitoring non-current assets. True or false? An advantage of using a book of prime entry in a manual system is that all errors will be eliminated. Well, false, you can never eliminate all errors. An advantage of using a book of prime entry in a manual system is that transactions are summarised prior to being entered into the general ledger. Yes, that is the purpose of the book of prime entry in a manual system. One purpose of the non-current asset register is to assist in the physical verification of assets. So that's true because the non-current asset register is basically a list of the details of all the non-current assets held by the business. So it would be possible to go to that list and then say, right, where's this, where's that, and check that those assets actually exist. It is important for the part of the business wishing to purchase high value non-current assets to obtain authorization. Which of the following is not a reason for this? So managers can ensure that funding is in place for the expenditure. Well, that is a reason for authorization because you basically don't want people without the authority to be ordering stuff and then there's no money to pay for it. So that would be a reason. So it's not the answer here. Managers can ensure that the spending fits in with the long-term plans of the business. Again, that is a reason why. So not the answer. So I'm hoping it's the last one. To comply with accounting regulations. So that is the correct answer because it's an internal situation, obtaining authorization. It's about running the business effectively. It's got nothing to do with accounting regulations. Complete the following statement regarding depreciation of non-current assets. The depreciable amount of an asset is the cost less the accumulated depreciation. Or is it the cost of the asset? Or is it the cost of the asset less residual value? Right, so the cost take away accumulated depreciation gives us the carrying amount. That's the amount that's shown in the accounts. The depreciable amount is the amount that needs to be spread over the useful life as fairly as possible. So the correct answer is going to be that, the asset cost less the residual value. The residual value is just what you can what you expect to get for that asset at the end of its useful life. Nancy Jones is a sole trader. She keeps a non-current asset register which is separate from the ledgers. VAT can be ignored. You are working on her accounts for the year ended 31st of March X8. Nancy has the following policies in place. Right, before I read those, I'm going to have a look and see what comes later. So she's selling a van. So that immediately tells me it's probably going to be a disposal question. So on 28th of February, Nancy sells the van. She receives £5,000 as a bank transfer. The van was purchased on the 11th of March X6. And on the 1st of March X8, she receives an invoice for a machine, an extract which is shown below. So we've got a lot of stuff going on here by the looks of it. Got some information here about James being paid £25 an hour to install and set up a machine. Right. So it looks as if this is going to be a non-current asset completion of a non-current asset register question. Enter this acquisition and the disposal into the non-current asset register shown below for 5 marks. Right, okay, so first of all then we have got, let's go back up. Right, so let's deal with the van first of all. So on the 28th of February 20x8, Nancy sells the van. So TA54VLC is being sold. Right, so here's this vehicle that we've been told has been sold. So what I need to sort of consider now is whether or not there's going to be any depreciation charge in the year of disposal. So now let's go back up to that information. So I'm interested in this sentence here. A full year's depreciation is to be charged in the year of acquisition, the year we get it, and no depreciation in the year of disposal. So the alternative to that, my battery's running low, hold on. So the alternative to that would be mention of a pro rata method of depreciation where it's done on a month-by-month basis. But here, there's no depreciation in the year of disposal. So that makes our life easier because that means that we're just going to have 0 depreciation in the depreciation charges column. And whenever something has been disposed of, clearly it has 0 value. We need to know how much it was disposed of. How much did we get for it? So she got £5,000. We were told to ignore VAT, I seem to remember earlier in the question, yes. Right, so I'm going to have £5,000 coming in on the 28th of February X8. So I'll have £5,000 in here. And I will put my date, 28th of February X8. I'd probably do 20 X8 there to be consistent. Now I'm just going to check if it gives me any instruction in the question about decimal points. Oh, here we are, look. All figures should be shown to 2 decimal places. Enter any date in the format date/month/year. If your answer is 0, enter 0.00. Right, so I'm glad I went back there because I should here have put 0.00, 0.00, and £5,000. Put the noughts in, and my date should have been written just in that format as instructed. Right, so I've dealt with the disposal. The question asks me to enter the acquisition and the disposal. So the acquisition is whatever we bought. So we have got on the 1st of March, X8, Nancy receives an invoice for a machine tool. An extract is shown below. So we've got the machine itself for £12,000. Incidentally, it says up here, relevant expenditure over 150 is to be capitalised. So that means that we treat it as an asset. So £12,000 for the machine itself. any costs, they call them directly attributable expenses. So any cost to get that machine into its position and up and running is also treated as being part of the cost of the asset. So delivery will be included, but a maintenance contract will not, because a maintenance contract has to be renewed and repeated. So it is an example of revenue expense, not capital expense. So far I've got 12,100 as the value of my new machine. But don't forget, it says James is paid 25 an hour and it took him 15 hours to install and set up the machine. Right, so I'm just getting my calculator. So £25 an hour times 15 hours is £375. So I'm going to add that on to my 12,100 that I have so far, which gives me a total of 12,475. Right, and that will be my total acquisition cost, the cost of this machine. Don't forget your 2 decimal places. Right, so I've done that. I've put in the acquisition and the disposal. It then says enter the depreciation entries. Right, so what have we got? So we've got an existing machine here. So we need to go and have a look and see what our depreciation policy is for the machine. So machinery is to be depreciated at 20% using the straight line method. It is assumed there is a 5% residual value. Right, so what that means is if we've got our machine, this originally cost 9,700. And it said that it's assumed there's going to be a 5% residual value. So that means the depreciable amount is actually 95%. Or you could work out the 5% and subtract it. But either way, that gives us a depreciable amount of 9,215. It then said that it was at 20% straight line. So I've worked out 20% of that figure, which not surprisingly gives me exactly the same as in the previous 2 years. Now you could have taken a flyer here and thought, well, it's straight line depreciation. Let me assume they've done it right. But it was quite nice just to double check the maths there. So then my carrying amount will be the previous year's figure, the 6,014, subtract that 1,843 of annual depreciation, which gives me 4,171. We then got the machine that we just purchased. Now remember, it was a full year's depreciation charge in the year of acquisition. So we're going to work it out in full. So 12475. Take off 5% for the assumed residual value, which gives us a figure of £11,851.25. Depreciation is at 20%, so I find 20% of that, which gives me £2,370.25p. The carrying amount will be the amount of the value of the asset, the 12475, subtract that 2370.25, which gives me £104.75. Right, then on to the vehicle. So we've already dealt with the one that's been disposed of. And then we've got a new acquisition. Sorry, not a new acquisition, an existing vehicle, where I have to work out the depreciation charge. So let's go and find out what the depreciation policy is for vehicles. So they are to be depreciated at 25% diminishing balance, no expected residual value. So 25% reducing balance. So when we have reducing balance, we apply the percentage to the carrying amount. So straight line, you apply the percentage to the depreciable amount with diminishing balance, reducing balance, whatever they prefer to call it. You apply the percentage to the carrying amount, which here is 14,700. It was 25%. So that gives me a figure of 3,675, which I then subtract from the 14,700, which gives me £11,025 as the carrying amount. All right, so quite a nice little filling in of a non-current asset register there for 11 marks. Complete the disposals account for the disposal of the vehicle, showing the amount to be transferred to the statement of profit or loss. Again, we're working to 2 decimal places. Right, so disposals account. I would have on my rough bit of paper a cost account, an accumulated depreciation account for sure, and possibly even a bank account so that you can see the completion of the double entry. Right, so the vehicle that's been disposed of, let's go back up for our information. Incidentally, you can usually get that information on the side here if you find it easier. Which I will for this one, I think. Let me just. The beauty of this is if you widen that, the writing still sort of, you don't lose anything, which is good. Right, so she sold the van. So she sold the TA54 VLC. And we know that the TA54 VLC had an original cost of £27,000. It told us that in the question as well, and we can see it in the non-current asset register. So that £27,000 will have been sitting as a debit in the cost account. So now we're disposing of it. Step 1 is to get rid of that cost. So in the cost account, we need to credit 27,000, and in the disposals account, we need to debit the 27,000. And the narrative there will be the cost of the vehicle. Step 2 is to eliminate the accumulated depreciation of that vehicle. So it's the TA54. The accumulated depreciation, again, if we look here, so depreciation charges were 6,750 in the first year that we held it. Add £5,062.50, which comes to £11,812.50. So the sum of all that depreciation will be sitting in our accumulated depreciation account as a credit balance. So we now need to debit accumulated depreciation and credit our disposals account with that figure. And the narrative is that it's the vehicle accumulated depreciation. Step 3 in any disposal is to recognise the proceeds. So the proceeds is how much did we get for it. Now that might be actual money, or it might be a part exchange settlement figure. Either way, it's going to be entered as a credit into our disposals account. So it tells us here that they received £5,000. So that means the double entry is debit the bank and credit the disposals. And here it's actual money, so we will put bank as the narrative. The question is working out the totals for me, so I can see quite clearly that the missing number needs to go on the credit side. So I'm going to find the difference between 27,000 and £16,812.50, which is £10187.50. put that in, it now balances. Now that figure will get sent off to the statement of profit or loss. Incidentally, it must be a loss because when it gets there, it's going to be a debit. And I know that debits are expenses. So a loss is an expense. I also know it's a loss because if you look at the carrying amount of this vehicle at the time of the sale, 27,000 subtract £11812.50, the carrying value was 1518750. I could have just looked up here, in fact. Yeah, there's the carrying amount there in my non-current asset register. Right, so the carrying amount is 1518750, and I only got £5,000 for it. So I am out of pocket. Effectively, what's happened is I've under depreciated, and now it's rectifying itself with an extra expense that's shown as that loss on disposal. Complete the journal for the depreciation charge for all of the machinery for the year ended 31st of March X8. Right, so all of the machinery, here's the machinery. So the total amount of depreciation is the 1843 add £2370.25. So that's 4213.25. Right, so any journal has the same figure, debit and credit. So before I forget the number, I'm just going to type it in. One will be a debit, one will be a credit. So I'm getting marks before I even think about what the narrative needs to be. Now, I don't really like the fact that it says balances here. I'd much prefer it said accounts, right? Because balances implies, you know, like it's a closing balance of some description, but all it means is what account are we going to debit and what account are we going to credit. So we know that whenever we have depreciation, we debit the depreciation expense because that's the cost of using the asset that is recognised in our statement of profit or loss. And this is machinery accumulated depreciation. So we're going to credit that. That has the effect of reducing the carrying amount of the asset that's shown in our statement of financial position.